Welcome to season 14 of the Parenting Aces podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and this week we have such a great episode for you with our guest coaches, Michael Joyce and Todd Widom. You guys may know, well, I know y'all know Todd because he's been on the podcast a million times, but Michael Joyce this is his first time on, and I'm so excited for y'all to meet him. Michael was Maria Sharapova's coach. He was Jesse Pegula's coach. He was Ashlyn Krueger's coach, and now he is between gigs and thankfully for us has the time to chat with us about developing players for the professional game, but also developing players just to be the best version of themselves, whatever that means. So it's interesting to talk to him, to talk to Todd, and to hear the way they were brought up in the sport by their coaches and how they are using those experiences to help the juniors and the professional players that they coach reach their full potential. So I hope y'all enjoyed my conversation with Michael Joyce, Todd Widom, and I would love to hear your feedback. So leave us some comments. Enjoy. Michael Joyce, Todd Widom, welcome to the podcast. Well, Todd, welcome back to the podcast. My audience knows you very well, but Michael, excited to have you on and to introduce the Parenting Aces community to you and your story.
Thank you. Pleasure to be on. I've heard about it for years and I've never been on, so I'm happy to be here tonight.
Yeah, great to have you. So you told me you're coming at us from a hotel room. You're at the IMG Academy working with some juniors this week after a successful US Open and now time to kind of move on in your career. But before we jump into all of that, I would love for you to give our audience a little bit of your tennis story, how you got started playing, and kind of your movement through junior tennis into professional tennis and coaching.
Yeah, so I'm 52 now, and I grew up in Southern California. My dad was a big tennis fan. He played a lot when he was younger, so he got me into it. I played all through the juniors. Southern Cal back I guess 35 years ago, you didn't really have Southern Cal and Florida were pretty much like the hotbeds of tennis. So, every local junior tournaments, we had Andre Agassi and Michael Chang and Jeff Taremi. You could go through the list. So we didn't really travel much except for a couple national tournaments. And I remember when I was first year 18s, I got invited to go play like Junior Wimbledon, French Open, a couple of the internationals. Which my last year 18s, I ended up winning Kalamazoo and getting the finals of Junior Wimbledon and did pretty good in some of the international tournaments. I was going to go to college. I committed to UCLA. They had probably the best tennis team that year, like ever. I mean, you had like Mark Knowles playing number 3 and David Sanguinetti was 6. So it would have been tough for me to even make the lineup. But I went around at the US Open after winning Kalamazoo, and I was able to sign some contracts, which helped for, the coaching and traveling. Back then, too, it was a little bit rare for a player to go to college for 4 years and actually make it. It's a lot different now. I think a couple of years after I turned pro, maybe Paul Goldstein might have been the first one that actually graduated and got to top 100. So most players went for a year or two or not even at all. But, like I said, that's changed a lot. But I turned pro when I was 18 and I played for 11 years on the circuit. And I got to 62 or something, my career high. So I did okay, but my career was cut short a little bit. My mom got really sick. She had cancer really bad for a few years and kept me home a lot. And then I had some injuries and stuff. So I went into coaching, and one of my first players that I traveled with was Maria Sharapova. And I had known her since she was maybe 11 years old. I think my coach in California was Robert Lansdorp, growing up. And back then you would take 1 or 2 hours a week, and the rest of the time I was with my dad or different people. But even when I was a pro, I'd go back and see him, take a lesson, work on my strokes, whatever. So I remember one day he was like, oh, I have this little girl coming over and she's like 9 or 10 or whatever she was. And could you hit with her for 10 minutes after your lesson? I was like, sure. It turned out it was Maria. So I hit with her when she was probably 10 or something. So I kind of knew her and her dad a little bit from that. And once when my mom was sick towards the end of my career, Robert, she was going out there a lot to work with Robert. And so I was hitting with her every day and kind of helping her. Robert was a great like technical coach. He was amazing, like discipline and technical, but he wasn't a lot into strategy, and he never really went and watched matches. I think he saw me play once in a junior tournament, my whole junior. So so I think I helped her quite a bit because I was just off the tour and I was still playing really well. So and that turned into me traveling with her for 8 years, and she she obviously did well. So it kind of put me a little bit in a boat of like women's coaching kind of. And then right after I stopped with Maria, I started working with Jessie. I got a call from a guy named Adam Gusky, who's was a tennis player from Florida, and he knew the Pegulas really well, worked for them. And I remember he called me. He's like, I worked for this family. I had no idea who they were. I worked for this family. Their daughter's 16. He's like, she hits the ball really good. I think diamond in the rough kind of thing. So we come. So literally like a month after I stopped with Maria, I came to Florida, spent like a week with her, and I wasn't really like convinced I was gonna be full time with her. So first like 6 months, I was kind of going back and forth between Florida, LA, and I really liked Jessie, and I figured she could be really good, and I think I saw a lot of things in her that maybe at the time people didn't see or know because she wasn't a top junior or anything like that. And then I spent almost 8 years with Jessie as well, and then it's kind of led into other things. So that's kind of a quick glance of my tennis background.
That's awesome. It's a good resume.
Oh, well,
You've had a lot of
you're only
success.
as good as the players you have, right? Sometimes the players can make you look good sometimes. Yeah.
And Todd, before I bring you on, Michael, I just
Whoa.
want to ask you. I just want to ask you, Michael, you said you saw something in Jessica Pegula that maybe others weren't seeing.
I mean, yeah.
Can you be more specific about what that was?
Well, for me, if I'm going to work with a player that's young and I'm going to you spend a lot of time with them, I like to kind of see where they're going to be in like 2 or 3 years. I don't really look. I mean, obviously, you work with some players that want results like next week, right? But a lot of times when you do that, that's usually when I don't think you're like coaching them the right way, or you're not really helping them because. And Jessie, I liked with her is that she always wanted to be a pro. She loved tennis. She wanted to be a pro. She didn't really care that much about where she was as a junior. Like I think when she played up a lot when she was younger. Her coach when she was like coming up basically taught her how to hit the ball was Billy Stearns. He was kind of like Lansdorp from like East Coast. So she hit the ball really well, but she had been playing up a ton. She had a lot of like guy hitting partners. So from a young age, she handled like pace really well, and like the better the player, the better she played. She had a lot of trouble with the juniors, or like I'd start taking her to like 25Ks, and she'd play a really solid player, play great, and then next day she could play somebody who's ranked 1,000 and junk balls her, and she'd lose like 1-on-1, right? So she didn't. So I felt like she hit the ball well. She was a fighter. She still could use. She could get down herself a little, like all young girls, but I felt like she could rise to the occasion, and but also I felt like there was a lot she could improve. When you look at a player and you're like, okay, they have a pretty good base, but you can improve this, you can improve that, like over time. To me, that's like kind of an exciting project. I ran into a lot of, after working with Maria, obviously the family's well-to-do, and they had just bought like the hockey team and the bill. So I got a lot of like people kind of probably thinking I was working with her just because they had a lot of money, or they were paying me well, whatever. But I really always felt like she could be like a top 50 player. Not too long ago when she got to top 10 and everything, I mean, I'm still really close with her. She's my daughter's godmother, and she would like write, can you believe I'm number 20, can you believe I'm number 10, like kind of thing. And then we always joke, like she got to number one in doubles. And I remember like first tournament I took her to when she was like 16 or 17. I said, "Oh, you should play doubles too. Like, you know, be good for your game." And she's like, "I'm the world's worst doubles player. I'm terrible in doubles." And it was funny. Like those first couple of years, she actually had a lot better results in doubles, and she started beating some players in doubles that she probably wasn't ready to be in singles. But I think it helped bring her along and the confidence. And since she played up a lot, like she didn't have a lot of like she wasn't winning a lot of tournaments and stuff. So I think the doubles kind of helped her like stay in the tournaments, realized she could play at that level. So to me, I'm really proud of that, even more than Maria, because I mean, I know it helped Maria, but I also think Maria probably would have been great whether I was with her or not. She was kind of ordained as like the future champion. But with Jessie, I feel like the fact of what she's done, I know those like 7 years or whatever, and she had a lot of injuries those years too, which I think 2 or 3 times she got to top 100 or right knocking on the door and had like a really bad injury and had to come back like 9, 10, months later and like start over. She did that. We did that together maybe 3 times or at least 2 times. So, that kind of resilience and stuff. I mean, even if she would have never been top 100, I would have not taken back those years, because when you have somebody who, wants it that bad and is willing to, do what it takes, didn't matter her family background or stuff like that. And, that's really it was a pleasure those years to spend with her.
I love that. I love that. And Todd, you guys have Ashlyn Krueger in common a little bit, right? Didn't you work with Ashlyn a little bit when she was younger?
Nope, not me.
Oh, why did I think it was you?
Maybe Mitchell Krueger. No, every tournament we always would get like, "Oh, Mitchell or Ashlyn." They're both from Dallas, and they think they're brother and sister, but they're no relation.
No.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. I thought they were related. Just guessing.
Most
and they're both
do.
Such good players. Yeah,
and they're both from Dallas, and they kind of look alike. So,
right.
but there's no relation there. Yeah.
All right. Well, I was giving you credit that you didn't have, so sorry about that.
No problem.
But kind of the gist of this episode is really to look at the difference between coaching high-level junior players who aspire to play college tennis at a relatively high level or a very high level versus coaching players that have the aspiration and the goods to play professionally. And what is the difference between those two types of players, and what is the difference in the training regimen and the day-to-day when you're working with high performance junior who aspires to play in college versus a high performance junior who has their sights set on a pro tennis career? So
well, I'll let Todd answer that, but I'm going to say something real quick. I especially with college tennis now, I think actually be a good college player, you have to have like the ambition to be a pro, like, because it's kind of maybe your ambition to be a pro and then like the best you can do is college, right? But like college tennis now is like, it's a lot different than when I was younger. Like I said, only, you'd go for 1 year or something. Now it's like, especially for the men, I think those 3-4 years in college are crucial. I mean, unless you're like a total phenom or something, because the game's so physical now and traveling. And so I think the training's probably pretty similar, but Todd probably knows that better than I do. He's got all kinds of people going to him.
I think we all know that the Americans are definitely struggling to go to a high level Division I college, right? The numbers don't lie, right? So, as we were speaking, prior to this episode, the upbringing of these players. Now, what's really interesting is that you were brought up by Robert Lansdorp, and I got to spend a couple days with him. I was invited to LA after my third semester of college by Justin Gimelstob, who was training at the University of Miami with Jay Berger, and I was training with both of them. And obviously, Jay was my coach there. So we had great sessions. And then Justin said, "I want to bring you out before I go to Australia." And man, he treated me like gold. Yeah. Before I knew it, we were with Lansdorp. I was hitting with Maria, right? And it was maybe 6 months before she won her first Wimbledon. with dad laying into her in Russian the whole time. I didn't know what he was saying, but I'm sure it wasn't always so positive out there. But anyways, you know, and what I thought of Robert was this guy is the West Coast version of how I was brought up in Florida. Very similar with, you know, the high repetitions and doing it right and more and ingraining it and these types of things. The only difference that I saw in the days that I spent with Robert was he really wanted you to hit through the ball and really penetrate the court. And I was brought up by some very well-known Argentines here in South Florida. And we were naturally going higher and heavier. And Robert didn't really like that when he first saw me. And then he said, hit through the ball. I said, no problem, man. Boom, boom, boom. I'll flatten it out. Whatever you want me to do, man, I will do it. Right. Yeah. And, I obviously respected him tremendously. And I knew, the players and the results that he had. So he told me, take some of the spin off and play a little lower and through the court. I said, no problem. So, I think the upbringing of players, right? The differences between, a tour coach and Michael, you've coached at every level. You're not just a tour coach. I mean, I know you've trained juniors and we have a very close mutual friend, and everything. And what I always speak about is I think the most important coach is the one who lays the foundation. Like for you, it was probably Robert.
Sure.
Right. When I have students coming into my program, a lot of the foundations are rocky. And if they don't get fixed or developed or tweaked, these players are going to have trouble progressing because maybe, the foundation that was laid was not a solid one. Right. Sure. And a lot of parents, I think, that, maybe they don't know much about tennis, but they do know if a UTR is going higher, they know if their child is winning or losing and these types of things, but maybe they don't know why and how. Right. But they do know that, their child would love to play at an awesome college or maybe pro aspirations and these types of things. Right. So, when we talk about like bringing up players, we spoke before the episode, tell me about your upbringing of, let's just talk about, managing of tournaments, because I feel like a lot of families, and even more so now than when we were brought up, it's the chasing of the points.
Yeah.
It's the UTR. It's this, it's that. And I always have said, you got to be chasing great training, right? Yeah. I feel like a lot of kids miss out on a lot of great preparation and training because they're constantly trying to chase results. But you can't get the results without the training. You don't get a great SAT without doing the great SAT prep, unless maybe you're some freak genius, right? Or something like that. So tell me your upbringing, because I think it was probably very similar to mine. And it might blow the minds of the parents that are listening to this.
Well, it's great thing to talk about, because I tell a couple of these stories sometimes and people like their minds blown, but a couple interesting things. One thing that was, I have a couple different scenarios, but I remember with Lansdorp, I actually started with a wood racket. Like they started going to graphite when I was about 8. And I remember Robert talked my dad into me using a wood racket an extra year, because he's like, this, your kid's 8 or whatever. He doesn't need the extra help. I don't want him thinking he's better than he is, kind of thing. And so I remember begging my dad, like, get me this, graphite edge or whatever that was coming out at the time. And then he told me, like, if I won some tournament, he was going to buy me a graphite. So that was like kind of a first step. Another funny thing is, John Leach is Jagger's father and married to Lindsay Davenport. He was like my arch nemesis in the juniors. I lost to him like probably the first 16 times. He was 2 feet taller than me, and in Southern Cal, 10 and under 12. I think I finally beat him in the 12 and under or something. But I found out years later, like every time I'd play a tournament, every tournament I played, John Leach was in it, and I'd always end up getting to John Leach and losing. And I kept and then my friends would play a different tournament and win the tournament. And I kept saying to my dad, why is this guy in every tournament I'm playing? I keep losing him. I found out later that my dad was going to the Southern California Tennis Association office he was finding out what tournaments John Leach was entered, and he put me in it. And like my mom, I guess, said to him, like, your kid, Mike's gonna like get discouraged. My dad's like, well, I don't care if he loses him 100 times, we'll finally figure out to beat him. And so he always saying, like, I lost to a lefty one time in a tournament. Next thing you know, I'm playing lefties all this. So I felt like my dad's kind of philosophy when I was younger was like, if it's tough for me, that's good, because it's going to make me learn how to deal with it. So it's funny, like years later when I was coaching Maria, like you said, in between after home, I'd work with some juniors and stuff. And I remember like computers came out, and obviously you could see all the results and draws and all the stuff, which I didn't have a lot when I was growing up. The rankings would come out, once a year, or maybe you'd see in the magazine once a month or something. But if you weren't like one or two, in my mind, like didn't really matter at the time. Like somebody's 32 or whatever. So I'm just trying to win the matches. And I was working with this boy. He was a pretty good player. And he was like, I don't know, 17 or 16. And I remember I did a whole like 2-hour workout with him at his house. And I said, oh, what are you doing next? He said, oh, I'm in the quarters of, Fullerton, some big Southern Cal tournament. And he's going to play Saturday. I was like talking to him about it. And then I'm like leaving the house, and his mom was driving in. I said, oh, the kid's playing. I don't want to say his name, just kidding. I said, he's playing really good, blah, blah, blah. I said, it's pumped. He's playing quarters like tomorrow. And the mom's like, we're going to talk to him about that. I don't really think it makes much sense to play, because, we were going over back then it was maybe blue chip she's like, if he he can't really gain anything by playing. And he's like, if he loses in the quarter semi, it's going to hurt him. And I felt like she was speaking Chinese. I'm saying, to me, I was like, the way I was kind of brought up, how I play, and I'm coaching Maria, and I'm sitting there, and I was driving home, and I'm like, that can't be good. Like, even if it makes sense, like he's trying to get a scholarship to college or whatever, but like, I've never heard of such a thing, like not play, because it's like not good for him. And obviously that happens all the time now, right? So at the time it was like a new thing, right? It's like with UTR, that's like, and so there's so much emphasis from the young kids of like, the ranking and chasing point. And, I mean, even when I had Ashlyn, and there was this other girl, Sarah, I was working with, like right before I went to USTA those couple of years, and we went out to, I think, Easter Bowl and like a big ITF were like back to back. And there was this one American girl who was like top 10 ITF. And I didn't know anything about juniors, and I'm thinking this girl must be amazing. And then I remember like the tournament started, and I think Sarah Ashton beat the girl like bad. And I'm sitting here going like, how's that girl? And then you find out for 2 years she's been going like South America, here, there, like everywhere, and her rankings like totally inflated. And it just ultimately, that's not going to make you a better player. Sure, if you want to travel to some tournaments, if family has the fun, to do it for an experience or to see what it's like, I mean, I'm all for that. But like, if it's taken away from your development, training, all that stuff, it's really, it's going to make you weaker long run. There's no doubt about it. You can't skip those steps. I mean, it is what it is.
Right. I mean, for the audience out there that's going to listen to this, which this may blow their mind, something similar to what you just said. I've had college coaches tell me they're going here or there, and the player is top 70 in the world, top 50, top 20, and they're really not even sure if that player is actually very good and could be a great player for that particular university, right? And so,
I believe that.
I mean, we just like growing up in Southern California and probably 10 years older than me, I lost to the same players for years and didn't leave Florida until I could prove that I could beat these players. And finally, now I was late blooming physically. Everybody would say, oh, you're trying so hard, and I'd lose a tough match in 3 sets. Oh, I think you're going to be good one day. Just keep working hard. I'm like, yeah, I've been hearing this for years, But, I was also late, physically, right? So then I started growing at 15 years older. So
I was the same. Yeah.
And then, things started to blossom. I started, to win a lot more. And then I was playing pro tennis at 16, right?
Yeah.
So I've told this to many of my students as recently, when I was in, 14 and unders here in South Florida, and playing, national clay courts, I'd win a match or two in the main draw, lose, win a match or two in the back draw, lose at, say around 13, 14 years old. But then in 2 to 3 years, I'm now playing guys 200-300 ATP on the road, right?
I did the exact same thing. Very, very similar.
Yeah. So, but we were also, I think what people need to realize is that, you were blessed and I was blessed to be brought up by coaches that were really experienced in high performance development.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But let me interrupt you one second, because this is something that comes up quite often with people that I work with. And Michael, you grew up in Southern Cal. Todd, you grew up in South Florida. Those were tennis meccas when you were coming up. They are still tennis meccas. But what about the family that lives in Middle America where they don't have access to great coaches or great training partners or, great competition locally? They have no choice but to travel. And so how do you balance that with these training blocks and, mapping out the year? We recently did a podcast with Mark Kovacs and talked a lot about this, the fact that these kids aren't building in training time. There's just tournament. And you can't develop fully on that kind of a schedule.
Sure. Well, yeah, but I think like traveling for training is a little different than like traveling to South America for 4 weeks to pick up points. That like, I think even, with like, even when I was younger, I mean, I used to go to Palm Springs all the time, even when I was 17, 18 and work. Like that was one thing Robert did well too. Like he was, maybe it's a little different now, but at the time, like if you got 1 or 2 hours a week with Robert, like one-on-one when I was 12, 13, that was like kind of a dream. I mean, most people did like 1 hour a week. I mean, even if you got in, right? And he could be picky about who he wanted because, I mean, he'd have these like drills, workouts twice a week. And there was like 20 national champions on, on the courts. But you had to have, like, my dad knew tennis pretty well and he was pretty smart. And I lived near UCLA and he understood that I needed obviously to hit with other people, play with other people. Like the stuff I would learn like fundamentally from Robert, like I work on with my dad. But I think it was a perfect mixture. I don't know if my dad did it on purpose or it's just kind of lucky in a way. But like, I remember like I'd go to Robert. This was for like 8 years. I'd go Tuesday and Thursday. I'd take 1 hour lesson and then he'd make us play like a match or something. It didn't matter who. I could play a girl. I could play, if you try to complain, oh, I'm playing, I'm better than this person, like he'd kick you out. Like it's not happening. He'd just play whoever's in front of you. And then he'd have like the workouts for an hour and a half. And then on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like my dad would, get some guy from UCLA or something to come. And so I learned a lot from those players, like those people too, because they were good players and they taught me a lot about strategy and, how to use my game and stuff. So, and then I had 1 or 2 guys that were good junior players that lived near me who had like a court at their house. I played with them too. I went to normal traditional school all the way through high school, but like all afternoon I'm playing, but it was like a perfect mixture because I did see some kids that just like only took lessons from Robert and then they thought that was enough, let's say, or they do Robert once or twice and then do groups and they weren't really playing. But there wasn't a lot of like complaining who you played with. Like that's something now, it's like, especially with the UTR, I've worked with a couple of juniors and, all of a sudden I set up a match and like parents are complaining because the UTR is too low or he's got to play a bigger UTR. It's like, it's crazy to me. Like, I mean, I'd be 14. Sometimes Robert, I have to play like a 12-year-old girl, like whatever. He's like, oh, if you can beat her bad, like beat her worse, don't lose a point or, come to the net more, that was like normal. There's part of like, but nowadays with all the ranking systems and UTR and different thing, and I think that part of that is why people travel like to play tournaments or go somewhere weaker because they want their UTR or ITA. That's where I think it gets tricky because, I mean, if you have a high ITF ranking because you're playing around weaker tournaments or you can go places that somebody else can't because your family has money or whatever, is that really going to make you a better player? How can it? I mean, it can't. It's
well,
just,
and it gets exposed, as y'all were talking about. I mean,
yeah, I mean,
eventually
maybe on
it catches
paper,
up.
yeah, it catches up. And maybe gives the kid false hope, but but the parents probably want the instant gratification. And I mean, but I think that's a little bit how society, right? So it's kind of changed a little bit in that way. But I mean, even me, I don't think I really thought about being a pro until I was like probably 16, 15, 16. I played tennis because that's what I did. I played tennis and I looked up to the pros. And I think maybe when I was 15, 16, I had a thought like, maybe I can do this kind of thing. So, now you see kids at like 7 that barely even know how to play, and the parents are already telling me they're going to be like number 1 in the world, and kids that barely hold a racket for a couple of times, right? So that's changed a lot too. So, I mean, things are just a bit different, but if you're trying to take shortcuts or you're trying to get easy points or you're trying to do that kind of stuff, it's not going to make you a great player. That's for sure.
Right. I mean, in my experience, all the players, all the great players I consider, very good that I've had in my program in 15 years, the numbers, they actually were never even a discussion. We never even
and ratings.
Absolutely. It was not even a discussion. In fact, like when, some of these players ended up becoming, say really top or number 1 on tennis recruiting or became a blue chip or, whatever it was, I was like, oh, hey, look at what happened here,
Right.
hey, because we always, and it's so interesting because Michael's upbringing with Robert Lansdorp was very similar to my upbringing here, right?
Yeah.
I bitched and complained when I was 10 years old that I didn't want to play this kid again, and I was thrown out immediately. Immediately. And then you'd have to call at night asking if you were allowed to come back.
That was Robert.
Lack of respect.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when they said you're going to play this person, you're going to play this person. And if they say you're going to play this person serving and volleying, that's what you're going to do. Right? And, let
me interrupt you one second. Let's talk about the value of playing this person that you think isn't as good as you, isn't going to challenge you. Why should parents support coaches that want their kids to do this type of training in order to get better?
Well, I mean, it's part of development. Right. And you can also work on things. Right. But also, I've had this discussion recently with a bunch of parents. For me personally, maybe you feel the same way, Mike, maybe not. I need 2 things from parents and every great player that I've had in my program since I got off the tour, I've had this. Number 1, 100% green light to do what I feel is necessary to help that individual. It may be a little abnormal to what's going on, but it's what I feel is necessary for that particular player. And this goes hand in hand as well. I need 100% trust from the parents.
Yeah.
Then you can do the job and you can do it well without restrictions.
That's right.
If you don't have that, it's going to be really difficult. Yeah. And quite frankly, then I don't want anybody to pay me for my services. It's not going to work well.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Right.
I'll tell you, I mean, a funny story. I remember when I was working with Maria, I was in the job for a while. Like I'd been working with her for a couple of years. And I remember one day, and she was always, very respectful and listen. And, you're with somebody every day. You're going to have some tough days here and there. But I remember one day she like Yuri wasn't even that involved at this point. He was like coming to just a few tournaments. She must have been like 20 or something. And I remember she kind of, I don't even know what said, but she kind of gave me like attitude on something. I said something kind of back, whatever. And I remember Yuri like literally like grabbed her like shirt and was like, said to her basically like, you never disrespect like Michael for like that. I don't care what you think. He's away from his family. He's here. He's doing it for you, only for you. And you never, ever disrespect. And I remember at the time I was like kind of shocked. and it was kind of weird too, because she never really was, but not like ever disrespectful really, but in this particular case. And so, and it's the same, like, there's a lot of parents out there who will, like, especially with all the coaching and different stuff nowadays, like they'll be, oh, he's a good coach, but he does this wrong or he does that, and once the parents show like they don't support the coach or show a little bit of like indecisive or weakness, you're done.
It's over.
It's over.
Yeah.
And I've recently had like some situations like that I kind of knew that was going on anyway. And so I kind of like prepared in some ways for the worst because of that. And, once you show, because if the player has a little question about, because like Todd said, I mean, you're not a good coach if you just always make them feel good, always let them do what they want to do. You don't grow like that, right? So, once there's that, and there's a lot of different options now, especially like where we live, Florida, California, parents, like the kid's not doing well, or parents, they take them to somebody else. And, there's coaches out there doing their magic dust and, come to me and make you, and I think that's very common these days, but all it does is make the player and the child weaker. And it also shows that they're not really taking a look at themselves in the mirror, right? And like, they're the ones that we're there to help them, help develop them, help them as much as we can. But at the end of the day, the player has to go hit the ball and go win the matches, right? And then that's another thing too. I mean, like Todd would say, any good player, it's always tougher to play players you're supposed to beat, players that you've beaten numerous times. I mean, even the highest, even in the pro, the highest level, a lot of that, players going to play better against a top ranked player just because they're kind of on paper supposed to lose. One of the hardest things is playing your peers, playing people that you're supposed to be better than. So if you're ducking that at a young age, you have no chance. You might have the chance to be pretty good, but you're not going to be great. There's no way. And so I think at a young age, when you get used to that, it just makes you stronger as you go on. But nowadays, it's kind of like people want to like hide their kids from, feeling pain or suffering. And that's what tennis is.
I mean, Michael, American amateur tennis is struggling, right? Yeah. I mean, let's call it what it is, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
I put up today, there was this video on Marin Cilic. It was just, it was on Instagram. And he said, I went through this training and it was, very normal stuff. One kid going line and the other kid going cross court. And we were doing 8 sets of 50.
Oh, yeah, all day. Yeah.
Okay, 8 sets of 50. So I went to one of my boys. I said, we need to do that. So I stood in the corner and we did 8 sets of 50, because if the Europeans are doing that, and probably the South Americans, why aren't we doing this? Right? It's not comfortable. It's hard as hell. Right? It's physically and mentally taxing, just like Cilic spoke about in his video. But hey, if that's how you need to train, and I'm sure you did stuff similar to that, I did stuff similar to that. Well, this is how you do it, right? And are you willing to do it, right? To the student, right? My question to you, right? And we talk about, kids, and parents going all over the place and traveling, and they're missing out on so much, training time and thousands of hours, right? How detrimental is it to kids when they're on the road continually? And I'll tell you, one of the most astonishing things when I got off the tour in the beginning of 2010 was I saw kids playing more tennis tournaments when they were, maybe 12s, 14s, 16s per year than when I was on the tour. I was like, what is, and this was 15 years ago. I'm like, what is going on here? This is insane, right? Because I grew up where if you didn't reach certain benchmarks in training, a certain amount in a row, everything solid, you were trained that when you went to a tournament, you were going to go very far, win the damn thing, right? Now, so how detrimental is it when the scheduling and the management
Right.
and the training. And not only that, physically kids are going to break down because they're losing fitness, and they're probably
Right.
not physically training on the road. So kids are getting hurt. Right. So
Right.
explain to me, because, you've been on the tour,
Yeah.
ITF tours and professional. So explain to me how detrimental that could be to a kid that should be training thousands of hours, but
Right.
instead they're traveling and playing maybe a match or two and then losing and not really training and spending,
Sure.
months,
Oh,
weeks
it's
or
a killer.
months.
Well,
How bad
yeah,
is that?
it's a great point. I mean, I remember, so one of the big things that I always felt was super important, like if you start going to like transitioning to a pro, like let's just say, so, over the years, I've worked with a lot of girls, even at like with USTA a couple years where, yeah, girls are 16, 17, they're either top juniors, there's a good chance they're going to be a pro. Some of them turn pro. And I remember I was in Charleston when I had Jesse. I moved to Charleston from LA, and I was there for like 2 years with Jesse. And I had a couple of Sam Crawford and Allison. There was like Melanie. Dan. We had a good group, about 6 girls. And I was obviously being paid by Jesse, and I was traveling a lot with Jesse, but she had knee surgery. And so a lot of these girls, Shelby Rogers, a lot of these girls were training, and we had a couple good coaches with us, but it was really good. Like for like a year and a half, we had really good girls training there. And some of them and my biggest thing was I was always like trying to find somebody to travel with them, like a good coach, because a lot of them, I remember asking Sam Crawford one time, she was like 19 or something. She had won US Open juniors, and she was a really good player at times. She had some injuries and stuff, and she trained really good in Charleston. She didn't have that much money to have a coach and stuff. And then she'd go on the road, and I said to her, and she'd come back and she'd be like terrible. Like you could tell she hadn't really been training. And I'd say, okay, that first week you lost first, second round. Like, what'd you do the next 4 days? And she's like, oh, I warmed up this girl and I hit, like this. And
Right.
so I said to her, I said, okay, so how many tournaments are you playing? And she was like 25 or something. So I said, okay, so you're like 30 weeks on the road. I said, do you think you're a good player? You're 150. I said, do you think this is like as good as you're going to get? And she's like, no. And I'm, no. And I'm like, well, you have to get a lot better, right? If you're going to make a living in tennis. She's like, yeah. So I said, so these 35 weeks, if you're not winning the tournament, which every once in a while she did, but the rest of the weeks, I said, you're missing all these days, 150, 200 days or whatever, where you're warming somebody up, you're by yourself, so you don't go to the gym like you should or whatever. And then when you're home, you're like training great, and like something kind of like clicked, and like all the girls, I would say that, it's like, and I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons that like maybe like Jesse or even Ashlyn or, even Maria, when she was, that they kept getting better, is because on the road, you have to, train just as much as you do at home. In some cases you
Right.
could actually gain more if you could play practice matches, you could play a better play, but a lot of the players don't do that. Obviously in the juniors, it's probably even worse. I mean, sometimes some of these tournaments, you have 6 courts with 64 draw, and you can't even get on a court, or, so when you're actually doing that as a junior, again, like you said, I mean, they'll say, oh, it's great, the experience, play the matches, this, that. But if you start adding up the time that they're missing from developing their weapons and their games and their mentality and all of this stuff, I mean, I think it's huge detriment to their development.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing from both of you guys is this is about playing the long game. So you don't play as many tournaments in the 12s and the 14s, but rather spend your resources, which is time and money and physical well-being, investing in development.
Well, and I'll interrupt you if you don't mind real quick.
No, go ahead.
It's a very good point. I think Todd will agree with me. I think matches are incredibly important, like to play a ton of matches. That's part of development. But you can play matches, like in South Florida there, you can play matches at Battle of Boca every weekend if you want to. I mean, sure, you want a mixture, but the point is like, if you're going to, South America for 3 weeks, you're really kind of doing it for points. Like they can't like fake you out and say, oh, we're going there for matches, because, local I mean, you can always find a tournament. I think, or matches, especially if you live in California, Florida, where there's Texas. I mean, there's tournaments every weekend. So yeah, I mean, I think kind of like like Todd said, if you're not beating the people around you, or I mean, your state, your get to the national, like and then now it's even funnier. There's like 3 or 4 different ranking systems. So it's like you sit there. I was working with this one kid. He was like 14. He was sitting in the car. I was driving him somewhere. He was on his phone. I said, what are you doing? He's like, I'm checking my ATO. I'm checking my USTA. I'm checking my IT. I'm like, what the heck? Like, and then if one of them's not looking good, let's work on the other one. My USTA.
How about you check your forehand, backhand, serve, your volleys, your transition
like
game, your slice, your physical fitness? Why don't you check that, buddy?
Yeah. I said, so what if your USGA ranking's not up, like doing that hot? Let's like focus on the ITF. Okay, they're both not doing good. Let's see what my UTR. That's ridiculous. I mean,
that's insane. So here's my next question, Michael. Well, a couple questions for you, right?
Are you putting me out of business, Todd?
You're done, Lisa. I've been on so many podcasts with you that I'm taking over.
Do it.
So, management of a junior player's career. Who should be managing that junior career? I'm talking about like the tournament scheduling. Maybe certain training blocks for a certain period of time. Who should be doing that?
Yeah, I mean, well,
in an ideal world.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think somebody like you, somebody like me, like there's coaches out there that have a lot of experience, not just because we played. I mean, we maybe have more experience because we played, so we going way back. But also, a lot of my ideas and coaches from, usually like history repeats itself. So you look at like Jesse coming up, very similar to Ashlyn coming up, or even, going back. And so I think our experience kind of tells us a lot of times what's more important, what's, obviously the parent knows their kid better than anybody. It's the parent, right? But it's the same thing. The parents that like ask a lot of questions, who go to like the right people, obviously they're spending their money, they're spending their, a lot of times they have to enter them, but they're getting information from, sources that have been through this a lot. I mean, I remember even Jessie twice, she had protected ranking, and I had protected ranking twice in my career. So I remember I was so proud. The second time she came back, her actually regular ranking was higher than her protected ranking after like 7 tournaments, because the way we did it, like, I had to play quality. And so, but again, I knew that because I had been through it, right? I'd been through it as a player. I'd been through it as a coach. So, that experience is super important. And I think sometimes the parents feel like, okay, the coach, did it with this person, but my kid is going to do it different, or, or we're going to do, I think that happens a lot. And
but we go back to the trust.
Well, exactly. That's why right there, that's exactly.
So right then and there, you're already feeling like, like you're with that player all the time.
Right.
But
even
they're going
USTA, like, I'm sorry, when I was at USTA for like 2 years, so one of the things that I really was, impressed, there were a lot of things that, go back and forth, but they do have this like, kind of like this pathway that's pretty accurate. I mean, of course, every once in a while something happens, your kid gets it, but it's pretty accurate. Like you start to see like all of the players that are successful. I mean, anybody can say they're a pro these days, but to me, if you're not making money and you don't make a living and you're not making a living playing, are you really like professional, right? So if you look at like the last 15, 20 years with all the data, it's pretty accurate, like kind of it's not based on ranking always. It's based, it's a lot of time it's based on how much they're training, how they're improving, from a fitness level to, it's like everything combined. And you'll see like, you'll see a kid that's maybe was really good at 15, but it'll show up that, they didn't believe in fitness. The parents didn't believe in fitness, didn't believe in this, whatever. And then you'll see like a year or two later, that person's injured and they never play again, or they miss a year. And I was actually very surprised by, they had data on girls and boys for like 20 years. And it's pretty accurate. And like, again, that's just information that the computer, everything is doing. But it's, when you look at like the top, I mean, obviously they don't have kids 200 or whatever, but like the, top 20, 30 kids in the nation each year, it's pretty accurate when you look at like the whole development and certain like benchmarks and stuff. And, of course there's always a, there's a weird situation, but it's pretty good. And that was one thing I was really impressed by. And it was a good way to kind of, if like the parents or something kind of felt like, oh, we're going to bypass that, we're going to bypass that or whatever. And it was like, even I remember my last year there, like Ashlyn, Robin Montgomery, Katrina Scott, like they were starting to do okay in pro tournaments. And I remember, like, obviously the winner of the national gets a wild card. They all could have actually like had arguments for getting a main draw wild card without playing nationals. And they're all like first year 18s, and we kind of made them all play nationals, and none of them really wanted to do it, like the top 4 or 5, And it was funny, that first round, Ashton was down 6-0, 3-0, like to like a 7 UTR. And she had been playing a pro tournament the week before in Stanford, and was literally in like the semis of the doubles of like a 500 event, and with Robin Montgomery. Robin's on the next court struggling like crazy, and then like Katrina Scott found a way to get out of it. Wonder how she's doing now. And then somebody else there, it was brutal, but Ashton got through that match and winning the tournament. Robin got to like the semi, they got through, but like, again,
it wasn't pretty,
right? And they didn't.
I was at that tournament. I was there that year.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah. Ashton was playing on the back court, and I remember Kathy texting me like, "What's the score?" I said it's like 6-0, 3-0. She's like, "Oh, she'll be." And I'm like, "She's behind." She's like, "What?" But just the nerves and the pressure, and and then I remember talking to Robin after she won like 5-5 against some girl she'd normally beat like 0-0, and she's like, "My body was so tense. I've never felt like this." Right. So, I mean, those are like feelings. That's part of your development, right? So, but a lot of people don't want to do that, right? And they think they can get away with it, and I don't really think you can if you really want to get to, get the most out of it. And so that's a decision, again, like Todd said, like a coach, or in that case they didn't really have much choice, because USTA, I mean, I was coaching Ashton for free. I mean, USTA was paying me, not her. Same with they're getting, obviously USTA spending money on them and stuff, so they kind of had no choice, right? And so they kind of all did it because they had no choice. But it's like, that's always the give and take. I mean, you're not always going to hear what you want to hear, and the easy way is usually not the right way, especially when you're developing. So
right,
there are no shortcuts to greatness, period.
No,
you have to work hard.
Yeah. I have another question, Michael.
Sure.
Okay, this is the last one. We're gonna wind up after
okay.
this.
The last question. Okay,
dinner
Michael.
time here in SoCal.
So here's my final question, Michael. How does American tennis get back to having big numbers of kids going to play at high level colleges when they're still playing every day? Parents are spending a lot of money. They got physical trainers. They got mental therapists. They got nutritionists. They got analytics people. They have a lot of things in America. How do kids get back? Because, you've traveled around the world. You've probably seen all these different training environments. I don't travel anywhere. I'm always here in South Florida. But you're very worldly, I'm sure, with, all your traveling with these awesome players. How do the Americans start sending more kids to great colleges and maybe pro careers? But
sure.
what needs to happen? I know we can speak hours about this, but explain to me just on the top, top of your head.
Well, the top of my head, I think one of the biggest, I think one of the biggest issues that we have, especially some of the younger kids that I've worked with over the last few years, is that we have almost too much knowledge and information. So, like I would be working, an example, I'd be working with a kid, you're working on return to serve, whatever. And then all of a sudden he would watch like Medvedev play, comes out the next day, or you watch, maybe not even watch him play, you'd see like videos on Instagram. The next day he's returning like 30 feet behind the baseline. And you're like, okay, you want to try that? That's fine. But they're changing, or they even change technique because they see, Musetti hitting a ball a certain way. And then that buys into like the parents also like changing coaches all the time. Yeah, that's really the biggest thing, because again, you're always going to find a coach who's going to kind of say, if you want to hear something, if you go to enough coaches and try enough things, you're going to hear what you want to hear. Eventually somebody's going to say what you want to hear. And I don't think there's a lot of consistency. I mean, even when I look back, like when me growing up, probably similar to you, with Robert and stuff. I mean, Robert like was part of my development, but obviously I mean, I went to him for 13 years, right? So even, and then if I needed, and he was the first one to say, I remember he sent me over, like he told my dad to take me to Pancho Segura. And because he's like, I want Pancho Segura to see his footwork. So he was open with me, like seeing like somebody that he knew was really good. Like he would be pissed if I went to some random person, but he'd be like, go see Pancho Segura, or go see this guy in the serve for a few days and come back and tell me what he said or whatever. But he kind of was like leading my development, which ultimately brought my dad. And my dad was pretty smart with tennis, and he had the time to kind of spend with me then. But it was always very much the same, and I think that's something I know in South Florida, it's huge because there's so many coaches, there's so many different academies, you get tough on a kid and the kid doesn't, want to do it, or, they can just go to somebody else. And, and I think that hurts them tremendously. Now, other countries, going into the question, I don't think they have as many. I mean, if you're from, a small town in Spain, and you're lucky enough to go to the Ferrero Academy, or you have an academy or club, or you have a coach at your club, or Argentina, I don't think they have as much access to, coach down the street, or, Everett Academy, one academy. I mean, I can name 4 Rick Macy. They're all within like 1 mile of each other. And then like, it's like, right. And you know how many times like juniors or parents will write me or call me up and they want to see me, or maybe I'll see them for a day or two when I'm home, and then I just can't do it. I'm on the road or I'm doing something else. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe you should go to Everett Academy. And then there's always some kind of complaint, or I send them to you. I mean, whatever. And there's always something, it's like, oh, the coaching's great, but this is bad, or this is bad. Right. And so, and you're sitting there and you're like, you want your kid to like play tennis and learn and get better. And also as a coach, it takes a while to know a kid and how to push them and what buttons to put. Months, right? Months. I mean, I always say when I'm coaching a pro, I mean, they're changing, and they're young kids, so or teenagers, they're changing every 2 weeks, right? So you're trying to catch up all the time, let alone some kid comes in and you see once or twice, and you're just like trying to figure out, like what you're going to say to them next, right? And it takes time. So I think that is something that happens in America that probably doesn't happen as much. I have a buddy that lives in Perth, Australia. He used to play, and like there's one good coach there, and it's like a big deal if the kid's good enough to go to that coach, kind of thing. And any good player that's come out there's come from that coach, kind of, was involved in some way or another. And then obviously the parents are important if they're going to spend the extra time, or an uncle, but that continuity is huge for the development. Wow. And I think that's probably US, we have access to too many things.
Right. Well,
in a way.
Again, similar story. I had the same coaches for 20 years, and you had Robert Lansdorp for 13.
I mean, that's how
right?
Well, even longer,
it's unheard of.
I mean,
you and I both. It's unheard of.
I mean, I met Maria when she was like 10, and so I was 23, and I was on the tour ranked 70, and I had my traveling coach, and I'd still go home and take a lesson with him once or twice a week.
Well, it was the same voice, and it was it was managed really well. You were brought up with the same philosophy as she was. That's why it worked. I'm sure,
exactly.
extremely well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I started coaching her, I didn't know much about even coaching. I mean, it was like not even women's tennis.
Yeah, but I'm sure Robert told you how to manage it.
Exactly. And what to work on and the drills we need to do and different stuff. And I could do it with her.
Right.
And, it was an easy transition voice. I mean,
right.
And then she was coming to ball at Terry's, which was also similar. It was like the same people, same coaches, work hard. It's kind of
right.
So the takeaway from this is that parents need to find a coach to work with their child that they can trust. And then they need to take the step back and let the coach do their thing. And they need to commit to that for several months at the minimum.
Yeah, for sure.
To give the coach the time to impart their wisdom, to help the child develop to their potential. And listen, stuff comes up. We get it. There are personality conflicts or finances get in the way or whatever. But barring those things, you've got to trust the coach that you choose, which means you've got to do your due diligence before getting started. And the way to do that is to ask the questions of the coach, ask the questions of the parents of the other kids that work with that coach, and really valuable, ask the questions of the parents of the kids that no longer work with that coach. Why are you no longer there? And understand the environment. But once you sign on the dotted line to have your child work with this particular coach, you've got to then take the step back and let the coach do their thing. Did I summarize that well?
Yes. Yeah, I think
I know Mike and I have been talking, 90% of this podcast, but that was very well done.
Really good. Yeah. You just took,
I'm trying to bring us back.
You made us look really bad.
No. I'm just trying to bring us back because we've been going over an hour, and just out of respect for everybody's time, I want to bring us back to where we started. But I do want to say thank you to both of you guys. And Todd, thank you so much for connecting me with Michael. And Michael, thanks for taking time out of your crazy schedule. And it's been great to get to chat with you. We'll have to get you back on.
Yes. Yeah. I know. I always respect Todd's, I always see his Facebook, and whenever I hear him talk, I'm like, yeah, he played, he knows. I mean, it's very, so I'm happy I was on with you guys.
That's not what you're commenting on my posts, man. It's never positive. It's unbelievable.
Well, to both of you, thank you so much for coming on. Michael, Joyce, Todd Widom. To my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces.